Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? We are Team Philo. With me, as always, is Mahadan and Kali as my co-hosts. How are you guys doing?
We're good, good. How are you doing?
Good, good. Kali, yeah, what I'm going to do is quickly introduce the topic. Basically, what we are doing in this stream is we're going to review a conversation that happened probably on Subboor's channel, Subboor Ahmed's channel, with Reece Byfield. And Reece Byfield is a PhD student in Cambridge University, and he's doing his PhD in some field in philosophy. I forget, but something relating to philosophy, basically. And so they had a conversation pointing out flaws at physicalism uh, as a theory, basically. And they picked a David Papineau's version of. They were basically attacking David Papineau's version of physicalism. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through that conversation and see if we can poke holes in their arguments, basically. Subboor Ahmed and Reece Byfield's arguments, basically. So before we jump in to the stream, guys, Mahadan, Kali, do you have anything to say? And just a moment, give me, and anybody who listens to this stream, please do subscribe, share, and do whatever to make our channel really big. All right, Mahadan, before we start, do you have anything to say, Kali?
No. I think we should jump into it.
All right, let's see
I
where
agree.
we go. All right, can you guys see the video? All right, let's see what are the. I think they have some casual chat in between, and then this main argument starts somewhere around here. I think. Okay, let me see what the timeline is. It starts at about 13:43, I think, something around here, right? Let me run it at. Okay, I can't run it post 7:20.
You chose to tackle, actually before that, what is physicalism before we go into challenging physicalism?
So,
Guys, you okay if we run it at 1.25?
okay, that's fine.
I think so.
Yeah. All right.
Physicalism isn't, but for our purposes, we can say is somewhat equivalent to materialism. But there are some subtle differences that we don't need to worry about. But essentially, the physical things, so everything made of atoms, electrons, protons, all of these things, that's all that there is in the world. That's all that exists. And that everything is essentially just made up of that. In a nutshell, that is physicalism in its most basic rendering. Now, obviously, if we have any philosophers here, they might stab that definition and say, well, that's far too open and you're straw manning it. But for the most simplest explanation, that is what physicalism is. It is the view that only the physical exists. There is no supernatural. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the caveat. That's what physicalism is trying to get to. There are no supernatural beings or forces. We don't have ghosts. We don't have deities. We don't have jinns or angels, essentially.
Yeah. So how is physicalism different to the position of naturalism?
Oh, you've put me on the spot now.
No, I mean, look, we don't need to get into all of the nuances and the differences and the things, but I mean, a working definition, because
most you should have told me to revise my definitions before this.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I mean, here's one way, and let's just do this sort of academic throat clearing because I think that helps for the purposes of what we are against as Muslims. We can put physicalism, materialism, and naturalism in the same category, right? I mean, generally, I think that's, and even though there's a difference between atheism and some atheists are not naturalists and whatnot, for our purposes, they're all species of the same type of kufr, right? So I think that's a.
Mahadan, you wanted me to stop?
No, keep going. It's fine. Keep going.
Okay. I heard some probably feedback or something. So I wasn't too sure whether. Anyways, generally we accept the definitions, right? And whatever the differences are there between, physicalism, materialism, naturalism, right? They're minor. Probably there are subtle differences, but
Yeah.
for the review of this, video's purposes, we're probably gonna ignore those, minutiae pretty much, right? Unless until the need arises, right?
Let me give a quick clarification though, because physicalists all physicalists do not deny non-physical stuff, right? Some physicalists do accept non-physical stuff. It's just ultimately, to be a physicalist, to have some meaningful distinction between physicalists and non-physicalists, you will have to say that if there are some non-physical stuff, it ultimately reduces to physics. In other words, there might be some non-physical stuff on one layer of reality. Ultimately, at bottom, it is constituted by forces which are physical. To be more specific,
Right, some physical stuff, whatever it may be. I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
Maybe that difference arises from when the term physicalism was coined, and probably materialism was a later term, and then naturalism was. So probably, naturalism is a broader term that encompasses everything, and then,
Yeah,
the,
right now, when I say physicalism, then it just to be appropriate to the video.
you're probably naturalism, saying naturalism, right? In a
No,
sense.
what I'm saying is when I say physical, kind of, yeah. I would say the definition of physicalism that I'm going to be using is similar to the same definition that I use for naturalism. That's mine. I use my definition of naturalism and physicalism are the same. Not every philosopher or person would think that way. But then I don't want to play semantics. So I just want to say that Reece is going to be attacking a particular viewpoint of one particular philosopher. And in order to devote that criticism in an appropriate manner to be against that person's point of view, he needs to adhere by some common understanding of what physicalism is, which that's shared with him. This particular philosopher, David Papanoa, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he defends the view. So far that I've been up to date with the literature regarding his views. I saw him in a video in 2020 very recently, so I don't think it's changed much, and he's defended it for a while. His definition of physicalism is that there are no such thing as mental stuff, or if there are mental stuff, it's reducible to physics. Okay, so let me repeat: there are no such thing as mental stuff, or if there are mental stuff, it is reducible to physics. And by physics, he just means particles, atoms, electrons, waves,
whatever, right? Electromagnetic waves, whatever waves you may have, right? And anything, right?
Yeah, he doesn't necessarily think that these things have dimensions in the old school materialistic form of thinking, like Descartes thought. A depth, a height, the width, a measurable, tangible thing. No, not necessarily. It's broader than that to encompass quantum fields now. So his definition of physicalism simply excludes the possibility of a disembodied mind. So even if there is a mental stuff, even if there is a mind, it ultimately boils down and reduces to non-mental stuff: physics, atoms, waves, quantum mechanics, whatever you want to call it. So that's his version, Papanoa's version. Now, so if Reece is talking about physicalism when he's interacting with David Papanoa, they have to have some understanding that they're both that Papanoa's version is that one, right? Reece's version simply says that everything is just physical, and Papanoa could arguably admit that that is arguably, I would say, that gels with Papanoa's understanding, as long as Reece understands that Papanoa is not saying that a disembodied mind can exist, that is ultimately irreducible to physics. Yeah, he's denying that can exist on his physicalist worldview. His definition excludes that. As long as Reece understands that. Yeah.
All right, I think that's a good clarification because otherwise I was gonna ask that question to you. What is non-mental basically? How do you define non-mental, or how do you even define mental basically? But that's a good clarification that
Yeah,
uh,
for now,
disembodied mind. So I
yeah,
would take this definition basically and highlight that any disembodied mind that cannot be reduced to physical is
yeah,
basically you know.
right. Which is a tautology, really, a disembodied mile by definition.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is a tautology, but I think we can't really elaborate that at this point, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If the mind is ultimately physical and is produced by physics and so on, then physicalism is still true according to Pipanawa. So he's not denying that mental states can't exist. He just so, do you understand now? Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. All right. Shall we move on then?
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
A good way to begin. That it's again a subspecies of that type of disbelief, a type of empiricism, right? Just believing in things that can be.
I wouldn't say empiricism is the same. I would say empiricism isn't necessarily something that is problematic with our theology. So I would only say like the real hardcore empiricism to say that knowledge is only through the senses.
Yeah.
Right. Definitively, that there cannot be any other form of knowledge. I would say that that's a problem. But in like the softer forms of empiricism, like I would say Ibn Taymiyyah is an empiricist.
Can I just say this thing? Did I hear this thing right? Is Subboor equating empiricism with naturalism? That's what he said, something like that? Or there was just
Yeah,
something I misheard?
I think, yeah, I
And
think
then Reece had to correct him basically, right? That this is not exactly the same, basically. Not you can't go to the yeah.
yeah. Empiricism is not necessarily physicalism, and physicalism is an ontological theory about reality. Empiricism is an epistemological methodology to learn about reality, and they're two separate things. Empiricism is the idea that you learn about the world through your sensory perceptions, sense data in the most most basic form, right? It doesn't presuppose any conclusions about the ontological reality that you will discover using that method. So
Right.
so empiricism doesn't presuppose that physicalism is true, and he's right. Reece is right that Ibn Taymiyyah, what he makes the argument that empiricism is compatible with the experience of God, with God, in the sense that if you die and you go to this world and it's an immaterial reality, let's say it's immaterial, there's no physical stuff, you're just a mind. It's logically possible that you can have an experience of communication with God.
An empirical experience that you can
And
have that.
given that,
It could still be non-physical, right? Yeah.
yeah,
No,
exactly.
why I stopped that video? Sorry, Madam. Why I stopped that video? Because I was thinking I wanted to attack Subboor here under the belt, pretty much, because I was thinking he would have known this, being a master's in philosophy. I think he has done master's in philosophy, maybe.
Yeah, he does.
I don't know.
I think
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah, you told me that, but
I don't know. Maybe I might be wrong here. I might be wrong. Who knows?
I
Anyway,
mean, what I was going to say is that Bishop Berkeley, the foremost idealist, who thought the world was ultimately a product of God's mind, right? That material stuff did not exist, hard physical stuff did not exist, dimensions did not exist. Solidity and all this stuff are illusions. In reality, all of it is constituted of ideas of the mind, just like a dream. Just like in a dream, it feels like you're having a cup of coffee. The reality is also like a dream, where it seems like you're having a cup of coffee, when in reality it's just a mental stuff. All of the reality is mental stuff. And Bishop Berkeley was an empiricist. So empiricism is not incompatible with these other realities, which is like immaterialism. It just means
substance dualism. Yes.
Yeah, you learn through your senses, right?
He was a substance dualist, right? Berkeley, Richard Berkeley, you said, right?
I think I don't know I forgot his name. I said Bishop Berkeley. He's a bishop. That's why. I don't know why I should call him a bishop because I don't know.
Okay, I'm thinking that Richard Berkeley is the philosopher Berkeley, or Bishop Berkeley. Are they two different?
I'm
Okay.
not
Maybe
sure who
not go there.
Berkeley is.
Not go there. All right, suspend that. Let's move on. Right.
Yeah. Just to note to people, other viewers, if you think empiricism is true, again, we learn things through sense data. It doesn't mean that those senses are the equivalent and the same as the brain. You can actually be an empiricist and think that the brain isn't the source of your senses, right? In other words, it is a very specific conclusion through empiricism that we learn that ultimately the source of, or the origination of those senses derive from the brain, right? It could have been, at least it's conceivable, but it could have been that our senses were never to be attached or associated with a brain. It could have been that we never would have discovered that. In fact, our taste, smell, hearing is connected to physical organs like the tongue, the ear, the eyes, which ultimately connect to a nervous system, a central nervous system, and a brain. That didn't have to happen, right? In other words, it could have been logically possible that in a different world, our senses would have been attached to something else, or a non-physical thing, or to be non-physical entirely. That's at least Descartes' idea, that it's at least possible for the mind and the body to be separate. Some people may not think that is possible, but I submit it's at least logically possible, and I grant that.
Right. All right.
All right,
So shall we move on? Yeah, move on.
No more soft.
Interesting.
Like he had he would take things like, even in the supernatural, right? Or what we would say the supernatural, but we would say that, look, if someone said, oh, but empiricism entails denying Allah, say no, it's not. You're going to see Allah on the Day of Judgment. Like these kind of things, right? Just because you can't do it now doesn't mean you won't be able to do it. And then if someone tried to say, but our bodies are going to be different, you'll say, what's the evidence for that? So
I guess another way to put it is, hardcore empiricists, say logical positivists, right? When they put those lenses on, they lead to positions like physicalism, naturalism, materialism. Yes. I think that's maybe another way to put it. So physicalism is something that you decided to challenge, and you decided to challenge it, I mean, in the form of countering an argument, right? The causal argument. And what's interesting is when you did this at Cambridge, your supervisor was the very person who formulated the argument, which I thought was very, it's a very unique position to be in.
This isn't like a unique argument. There's been others before him. It's quite a popular argument. There's quite a few physicalists have put this forward, but he's just one of many, and he's written quite a few books on the topic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, Madan, I couldn't hear you.
Just to correct a bit of Subboor here, he might be right. I think this is more of a quibble of Subboor's point. But I know the logical positives actually didn't have any hard ontological or metaphysical conclusions, right? So the logical positivist, inspired by David Hume and Wittgenstein, Hume's fork was that either things boil down to analytical truths or synthetic truths, ideas of the mind or ideas of experience that are gathered through experience. So we learn through experience, and then we have ideas of the mind, which are like analytical truth, like all bachelors must be unmarried, squares cannot be triangles. If something is red all over, it can't be blue all over at the same time. And he thought all of human knowledge, whether it's fact of, what we call as facts, boil down to those two types of knowledge: ideas of the mind, ideas of experience. And the logical positives took from that and developed a methodology called the verificationist principle. And they actually didn't have any hard ontological commitments or conclusions about the nature of reality, right? They thought we can only verify that statements, or meaningful propositions must be truth apt. That means that we should be able to conceive of a situation where we can go have an experience to either verify or falsify the statement, the proposition. If it cannot be verified or falsified, then it is not a truth apt proposition, right? And then inspired by Hume, they said, throw it to the fire or something like that. Throw it out the window. In other words, our verificationists, these are called the verificationists or the logical positivists, they thought Any proposition that cannot be tested like that is completely meaningless. It might sound grammatically meaningful, but it's meaningless. Let me give you an example of a grammatically meaningful statement that has the illusion of being a testable proposition, but it's actually not truth apt. Yeah, observing reality as it is, mind independently. Right now, you might think that is grammatically meaningful proposition that you can test. Like, the tree exists actually as it is, but you can never test that. In other words, you will always be bound by your senses to perceive a tree. And even if you somehow manage to figure out of a way to leak out of your brain, and yeah, then you're still bound by your senses. You'll always be bound by your senses to observe a tree, right? So to test the proposition that the tree exists independent to the mind, independent to your senses, is an impossibility, because it cannot be tested. You can never falsify or verify that. It's outside of your epistemology to do something like that, right?
Right.
So that's a meaningless statement according to it's not truth apt. And you can think of other non-truth apt statements. Some people thought even ethics were like that. That's why the logical positivists thought all of ethics, all of morality is non-truth apt. They're not truth apt propositions. They're not propositions. They're expressions of emotion, because you cannot go and have a test to confirm that you ought to give charity. What sort of, can you imagine a situation where we can confirm or falsify that statement that you ought to give charity? That there's a fact of the matter about it through an observation or analytical truth. And they said you can't do that, therefore it's meaningless. So the logical positivists also didn't have a hard ontology about the absolute reality of the world. They would have said, therefore, the idea that the world is made out of physical parts isn't, in a strong sense at least, isn't the case, because we can never go out and confirm that. We can only have experiences with things that seemingly seem physical, like the phone, the tree, the atoms, and so on, all these things we can observe. But to actually say that the essence of reality is entirely ontologically physical is not something that we can go and test, because we can never escape our minds to test that. It's not a truth apt proposition. Right? Subboor, this is more of a quibble, because they will still accept physicalism through our observations, right? You can still make a tentative statement that here are atoms under a microscope, and the causal closure, the entirety of the universe is made out of physics. But to make the claim that that is all that exists, mind independently, let's say, that had we not existed, these physical things would continue to exist, is not something that they would agree is indeed a truth apt proposition. They would say that's a meaningless statement or a meaningless proposition, not a proposition at all.
All right. Yes. All right. Agreed. Shall we move on then?
Yeah, go for it.
Trying to defend at least one premises of the argument, which we'll discuss.
Okay, brilliant.
But yes, I was in that position where I was at his mercy.
He sounds like a very fair man. When I was prodding you to get your, what result you got, I mean, it sounded like he was being quite generous.
What I'm gonna do is, Mahadin, I'm just gonna move on to David Papineau's argument, right? I'm gonna move forward.
Let's just quickly hear this part. Quickly hear this part, though.
You want me to maybe speed it up to 1.5?
Maybe go for it. Yeah.
Even though you were trying to tell
He was a nice guy.
he was a nice guy. So David Papineau, can you go over his background? Like, who is he? What does he hold on to?
He's talking about his background. We can probably skip this part. Or you want to hear that background as well?
I want to hear it because I want to know whether or not he accurately characterizes David Papineau's views.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's essential for our review, then I think we should.
It may or may not be. I can't remember what he says here.
Yeah.
What's his background?
You should have given me this update to do some detailed research into these things first.
You should be ready. Off the top of your head, I mean, anyone that Googles
in a nutshell, I would say that. So if we remove him from our kind of theological basis, he's he's a very interesting philosopher, and some of the work that he's done is very interesting. So his kind of line of focus is very much within philosophy of science and the kind of branches from there. So the course that I actually studied with him was philosophy of psychology. Now, when I signed up for this module, I thought it was going to be something totally different. I thought we were going to perhaps, you know, study some Young and things like that. Some what's his name, man? Some Jordan Peterson stuff. That's what I thought we were going to get into. But no, it wasn't that at all. We were talking about neural networks and physicalism and all of this kind of stuff. So Papanu's kind of focus and a lot of the work that he's written on, and he kind of mentions this in his book, and he mentioned it to us in class as well.
Yeah.
When it comes to physicalism,
yeah,
he said that he was very much surprised that other philosophers and even scientists didn't just accept physicalism to be 100% true. And he sort of went on a mission per se. He had his own da'wah. He accepted the call and he went forward, and he wrote several books and articles attempting to support what is premise 2 of the argument, which is the causal closure of physics.
Mm-hmm.
That is in a nutshell, put
Sure.
very, very simply, that all physical effects have physical and only physical causes. And the idea behind this is that, or in another way to put this, is everything can be explained by physics. There is no external forces, and the entailment of that is obviously God doesn't intervene. There are no miracles. There are no minds. These kind of things. Yeah,
brilliant. And just so everyone understands, you know, his importance here. You know, he has a PhD from Cambridge, which is obviously not easy to get. And him answering the call of defending naturalism goes back all the way to the 80s. You can find his earliest publications from then onwards, and he's still active today. So we're talking about a big shot here. We're not speaking about you know, some random atheist professor. And I think that's something, Reece, I wanted to highlight because you know, when we spoke last week, I was really surprised, and you know, you decided to write a paper against his argument. So if we can go over the basic nuts and bolts of his argument, what is his actual argument for physicalism?
So one of his arguments per se is the causal argument, and it's a popular argument that's kind of been rehashed and developed, and he feels that his is the best version, right? I mean, it's one of the more modern versions as well. He's developed it over time. So it's a 3 premise and conclusion argument. The argument starts off with that conscious mental occurrences, your thoughts, your intentions, you're deciding to pick up a glass of water and things like that, they have physical effects. They have real effects in the world. That's premise 1. Premise 2 is the causal closure argument, which is all physical effects are entirely caused by purely physical prior histories. Meaning, so this is his rendering, which is slightly different to how I worded it before, meaning to say that at some point in the past, there we go, at some point in the past, something happened that caused Z. So A caused Z, or A caused C, but not necessarily A, B, C. There are a series of physical things that amount to the modern day, which also kind of entails determinism, right?
Yeah.
So that's his second premise. So kind of reiterating that and making that a bit more simple, that everything that happens in the physical world is only caused by physical causes, or whether they be immediate or in the past. It's only caused by them. Then he goes on to say, so the third premise is the physical effects of conscious causes are not always over-determined by distinct causes. So what he means by over-determined is 2 things happening at once. So he's essentially saying that every physical effect has one physical cause in this case. So, sorry, I messed that up here. Yes, no, that's what he says. And I got confused of something that he says later. So he's saying here that it's not always the case that something physical, a physical effect, has 2 causes. There's instances of only one physical effect. So to put this, what I mean by overdetermined, because it's a bit of a weird concept for some people, is let's think of someone that no one likes and we can't get in trouble online for. Let's say like Hitler. Everyone dislikes Hitler. Yeah. Let's say we man A, not me and Subboor. Man A pushes Hitler off a cliff, right? And as Hitler's just about to hit the ground, man B shoots a gun, and they both have an effect on Hitler such that it results in his death. Mm-hmm. Which one of them killed Hitler? In one sense, both of them did, and in another sense, only one could. So that's what overdetermination is. And what he's kind of getting here at this point is that the real point of this premise is, okay, me picking up this glass of water now was, in my mind, for purpose of demonstration. But also, certain neurons fired in my brain, and then those set signals which triggered my muscles and lifted the glass. Those are 2 different causes. Now, what he's trying to say here is there are instances where there are no mental state, as in I'm not conscious of certain actions that I do. Say, for instance, I might twitch or something like that. There was nothing happening in my mind that caused that, but there was something happening in my brain. That's the point that he's trying to make here. That there are instances of physical effects that do not have more than one cause or no mental cause involved. And then, which then basically leads him to the conclusion, which is, therefore, physicalism is true. Mental states must be physical states. Because if it's the case that your physical actions can be caused solely by your brain, And there are instances when your mind or your consciousness is not involved, then your consciousness is just a physical state, and that your consciousness is not a soul or is not anything supernatural. Rather, it's what some people would say is it's an illusion. It's an illusion of the brain. It's your brain software, just maintained by the hardware. That's essentially the summary of the argument.
Okay, can we stop it?
And this particular argument, even though it's quite simple.
Can we stop it? Yeah. Kylie, are you okay? You're a bit quiet.
Yeah. No, I'm just listening to you.
Yeah, I think I just wanted Mahadin to explain this definition. I think he has done a good job of that definition, Reece, right? So maybe simplify it a little bit, maybe for the audience.
I would say he's a bit clumsy there, simply because he doesn't represent Papineau's view accurately. The last thing that he said, that Papineau thinks that consciousness is an illusion, is false. Right?
I think he has inserted a few different things from his side, right? Consciousness is an illusion and all those things. But
consciousness is not an illusion. Papineau never denies that. Before I reviewed this video, after I first saw this video, I went and checked out Papineau's most recent views. So unless, again, we need to be charitable to Reece. Maybe he knows something about Papineau that we don't know. He's been in much closer contact with him. And I'm assuming, we don't have any viewers for this video, which is not surprising given the academic level and difficulties of this.
Mahadin, can I stop you for a second? Yeah, I think I predicted that based on how difficult a topic this is. This is gonna go over the head of. I wouldn't demean anybody by saying that, but I don't think anybody probably is gonna find this very interesting. This topic is really deep, probably. That was something to be expected, but yeah.
Yeah, what we need to be aware of is that it's very possible that at least Reece would be watching this, and we welcome him on when and if he wants to clarify his views, right? So this is why reason I'm saying this, and if he ever watches this video, because when I saw this video for the first time I saw him interacting under the YouTube comments, and I thought it's very possible that if we make a review that he might respond to it. So we have to be at least charitable for Reece, not to mischaracterize him. So if he knows something about Papineau, and therefore what I'm trying to say is that even though we might have a low audience turnout, this is a video for a different purpose as well. It has a secondary goal, I think, right?
What we're gonna do, Mahadin, sorry, I'm interrupting you. What we're gonna do is we're gonna post it to underneath the comment section at Subboor's original video, basically, and invite Reece or even Subboor to maybe have a conversation. Let's have a dialogue, right? Maybe it's something where our understanding is not correct. So let's hear them, basically, right?
Yeah. Let me just go back to Papineau's views then. Papineau doesn't think that the brain is an illusion. The mind is an illusion, or just an illusion of the brain. Rather, I think to be charitable to him, maybe he means he thinks, and I think Reece would agree with me here if I make this correction.
Right.
Hello?
Yeah. Sure.
I've lost you.
Can you hear me, Mahadin?
I can hear you, but I can't see the video for some reason.
You can't see the video?
Hold on a minute.
I can see the video. It's not playing, right? You're not playing the video yet.
Yeah, I'm not playing the video. Yeah.
All right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. As long as you can hear me.
You want me to start playing, right? I thought you were finished.
No. I don't want you to stop playing. I think that was a bit of a. Basically, I'm not looking at the screen anymore. The screen isn't there. I'm randomly on Google, but I can hear your voice. The audio's there, but the video's not there. When I say the video, I mean the stream. I don't mean the actual. I don't mean the YouTube stream.
Okay.
Our stream.
So I'm going to go ahead and play the video, right?
No, don't do that, because I've still got a few things to say.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's what it's.
What I'm saying is maybe what Reece means here is that Papineau thinks that the element of causation, mental causation, is an illusion, right? Or the fact, maybe that's what he says. In other words, when he talks about overdeterminism, overdeterminism is that theories, when you posit a theory, if one explanation can explain everything entirely, and then you posit extra entities, and those things don't explain the phenomena, or there's no reason for it to, then those become redundant, right? In this case, can you hear me, by the way, everybody?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in this case, basically, what it means by the causal closure principle is that since at bottom, since the beginning of time, since everywhere we look and everywhere we measure, we just see physical explanations, physical things. It has a higher, therefore, in order to have a completeness of physics, it would be completely sensible to presume that anything that we find within the universe is going to be ultimately a physical phenomenon. And when I say that, in order for it to be consistent with the completeness of physics, is because physics doesn't allow for any other entity to fit into this area. So think of it like a room full of billiard balls. Imagine all the spatial points of that room is occupied by a billiard ball. Well, if every single spatial point, every single coordinate, every single geometric point of that room is filled to the max with a billiard ball, you can't add anything further to it. And that's what kind of physics is like, right? When you have stuff like, and scientists know better than I do, and all of us, when you have stuff like the conservation of mass, when you stuff about entropy, you don't have any further space. When you have particle physics, you don't have any further space to add an extra substance. Everything is explained by these fundamental laws, the 4 fundamental laws. So when you think about the 4 fundamental laws, that explains everything. The idea that you're going to have this mind doing mental stuff as well, that coordinates your behavior. So your mind, you think about something, then because of that thought, this immaterial soul-like thing causes something in our nervous system to pick up the glass and then drink the water, let's say. So you have this kind of trajectory of events from your mind to your nervous system to your muscles to grabbing the drink, etc. Now, Bipanawa says, given the completeness of physics, this is a bizarre reality. That's the first thing he says. Yeah, it's unlikely that they're going to have this extra separate substance because physics doesn't accommodate this. There's no space for this extra substance to create this cause where you pick up the glass, right? The second thing he says, as Reece pointed out, is overdeterminism, which I just explained a second ago, which is if you have more than one sort of cause that can do the thing, right? Here you have a mental causation and you have physical causation in the brain. We have instances, as Reece said, of showing that the brain can completely explain the picking up of the glass. So your brain fires a neuron, it goes down the nervous system, goes to your peripheral nervous system, it goes past the neurotransmissions or the synapses and so on. It then adjusts your muscle in such a way to pick up the glass. In this picture, in this account of everything, right, the brain explains every part of this behavioral phenomena, right? So overdeterminism is the idea now that if you have this extra soul, it's not doing anything, it's redundant. You don't need to posit a soul to explain the brain picking up the glass. And the example that he gave is a decent one, which is that I'll give a similar one where if people are being shot at, a marksman is shooting, lots of people with rifles in a gun range are shooting at a human being, right? Now, it's very possible that every single one of those bullets would have killed the person. Let's say the person dies, right? And he is shot multiple times by all of these people at the gun range. But which bullet actually killed him, right? It's not necessary to posit that all of those bullets killed him. In fact, only some of them killed him. The rest of it is redundant or superfluous. The idea that if some of the marksmen would have missed, then the other bullets would have killed him is indeed true. But in actuality, the vast majority of those marksmen, the riflemen, the shooters, were unnecessary and superfluous. They're superfluous shots. They are causally redundant, causally superfluous. And this is the same thing about so a theory that suggests that all of the marksmen has killed a man is wrong. It's overdetermining the causes, overdetermining the data, the explanation, right? Because it's already determined by some of the marksmen. And similarly, this sketch of the physical concept of the brain and the nervous system, wholly it can explain all of the events. There's no room for something extra. So what Papineau argues is not that it's an illusion, but the psychological states can exist, minds can exist. It just doesn't exist in the same way as a disembodied mind, separate from physics. That's the illusion. He's not saying the psychological world is an illusion. Can you see that?
Right. Madan,
Right?
it seems like Kelly has dropped out. Okay.
As if-
Kelly is back. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Can you so this is kind of heavy lifting. It is heavy lifting, but it shouldn't really be heavy lifting, but it is heavy lifting for. But in this instance, the mind would be epiphenomena, and epiphenomenalism is the view that the mind is pretty much the idea that the mind has this kind of causal impact is flawed, right? Sorry, let me revise that. I'm wrong there. I'm completely wrong to get that right. That is wrong. Epiphenomenalism is the idea that the mind is unnecessary in this entire mix of things. So the mind just comes with
because
the mind.
that's the cause of over determination or over.
Yes, a consequence of overdeterminism. Is
I mean,
that
according
the
to overdetermination principle, basically,
mind-
this is mind has no usefulness in our case, basically, because all the events can be expressed or explained
Yes.
by rather not.
Yes.
Sorry, I said explained by just the simple
Yes.
physical events, basically. If you're saying basically, if you push the domino, the nth
Yes.
domino that's falling has one single cause, and that is the push, basically, right? And that's what you're saying in this case, that mind is unnecessary, right?
Yeah, and when you add the overdeterminism thesis with the causal closure says that physics is already complete. There's no room for some extra stuff. The four fundamental laws, there's nothing else. It's like the billiard ball example. All of the room is occupied fully. Yeah, it's like a cinema that has all the occupants in the chair. There's nothing. You can't add another occupant in the cinema. Or Hilbert's Hotel, it's complete. You can't add. It's like that. The completeness of physics is that physics. There isn't any space for a mind to enter the picture. It's all deterministic. It's all causal.
Right, and
yeah. Get it.
in that scenario, Mahadan, what Reece said probably a few minutes back, and that also makes sense. Then probably determination is true, and it's in effect, basically, if we look at it that way, right?
Yeah. This is Papineau's view. If he's right, if he's right about the causal closure principle, if he's right about the overdetermination thesis, then the mind is causally inert to some extent, as this kind of separate entity that can do things. Just the clarification that I would say is that Papineau doesn't deny that a mind exists. It's ultimately physical. So the mind is not, in his view, as far as I can understand it, the mind isn't completely. The mind, first of all, it might be that his view is that the mind is identical to brain states, right?
Right.
So when he says nervous system, nerve C firing, C nerve causes an electrical impulse down the spine, goes to the peripheral nervous system, pulls on a muscle in the arm and the forearm, and that causes you to pick up the glass. When he says this, he's also saying that is identical with the mental state as well, right? In the same sense that H2O is identical with wetness or wateriness, right? Or water, right? H2O, the molecules, the collection of molecules that constitutes water is identical with water, right? In the same sense, in the exact same sense, brain physiological parts, neurological parts are identical with, at least the relevant parts, are identical with the brains, with the mind states. So you don't need to posit this extra mental disembodied mind separate from that, because they're one and the same. Your nerves, the brains are one and the same as the psychological states, right? And this is consistent with the causal closure principle and the overdeterminism thesis. In the traditional sort of classical Descartesian view, if you posit a brain and a mind as two separate entities, then you have problems with overdetermination. You have problems that it conflicts with the causal closure principle. But if the mind and the brain are the same, then you just have one cause. Then saying that brain state, nerve fiber fires an electrical impulse, causes the forearm to pick up a glass, is an identical statement with the statement that I got thirsty, so I picked up my psychological state picked up a glass, and my psychological state brought it here.
My mind did all those things. Right.
Yeah. But in that sense, he's not saying it's an illusion. But in the Descartes sense, in mind-body dualistic sense, that there's two separate entities, in that sense, he's calling it an illusion. I just want to clarify that. And I'm sure Reece would agree with what I'm saying here.
Right. Okay. Callie, you want to add something to it, or shall we move on with the video? I think we still have quite a bit left.
Yeah. No, I think go on. I think Mahadin has been explaining, has been doing all the heavy lifting till now, but I think he has been explaining it quite well. So I think, I have nothing to add on to it right now.
Do all the heavy lifting here.
That's
the deal.
I will add probably something when we are talking a bit more about mind later on, but not right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, let's move on quickly with a couple of these points. Maybe get down to the objections if you can. Now we have.
Right. Yes.
In his formulation, I think earlier on you said just to defend one of the premises, he actually published a book.
Yes. I mean, that's going to be the premise which we're going to attack today, which is the causal closure of physics.
Okay.
And I think perhaps it'd be good to spend a bit more time on that to kind of explain what I mean by that before we get onto some of the issues we have, or we'll just end this live stream really quickly. So essentially, the causal closure of physics, I believe I said earlier, is the idea that everything can be explained by physics. Yeah. So what this means is that, and it kind of comes really in hand with determinism, and it kind of goes along with certain things that physicists have said in the past, like where Einstein said God doesn't roll dice and things like that, there is a clear structure and flow of physical things that are happening, and there is an explanation for them. What this means is that all occurrences within the world can be explained. There is no mystical things. There are no supernatural. Everything that happens, right down to like me picking up the glass, what I chose to eat in the morning, who you marry, which university you attend, what mark you get in the sense to some extent, right? Or how you, or the decisions that you make when you're taking your exams, or me and you on this podcast right now, and the decision that you had to take my details and invite me, can all be explained by physics, and there is no consciousness involved. That's essentially the depth of the causal closure of physics, or the completeness of physics in that sense. And I think now's the point where I hope some of the viewers and yourself, Subboor, feel that disgust, because it goes just beyond having to deal with things from like like how would we as Muslims deal with this? How do we defend the soul? Because there's a lot of potential theological implications that we can come here, right? Yeah. So what does this mean for us theologically, I suppose, is the point to say, right? Yeah. Well, it means, how do we explain the ruh? How do we explain the soul? Where does the soul come into this? If our ruh, like let's just say, okay, well, physicalism, somehow we accepted it. We got fooled by our university professors when they gave us a lecture. Does that mean that the ruh is solely dependent on the body because it's the software of the mind? So how does our ruh live after our body's death? How do we explain?
All right, just stop for a very small point here. See, the kind of approach I'm seeing, and I'm not gonna, go into detail into this. Their first approach is to find out how they're gonna fit the ruh in it, basically, and that's their fundamental problem. That's how they are trying to wiggle out of this problem of physicalism. Is basically, if it is true, then they just can't have their own ideology fit into it, pretty much, right?
I would say to this, facts don't care about your feelings. So if you're retrofitting the data to fit your worldview, that is not proper philosophy. A real philosopher should not be afraid of the truth, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
this conclusion of physicalism doesn't necessarily make me happy. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant, right? It's just
Yeah, if it is true, then it is true. I mean, then you have to shove your worldview away, pretty much. Then the deeply held beliefs that you have or had, you have to shove them away, pretty much. You examine them, and you probably would say, okay, my beliefs were wrong, probably, and then
yeah,
that's how you move. Not that retrofitting your worldviews into this,
yes,
physicalism hypothesis or theory when it becomes the theory, maybe. Anyway.
And I think that, of course, that is a large part of their motivation of you know debunking physicalism, because they have to protect their worldview about the existence of soul, and of course the disembodied mind. So I think, of course, that is their, I think that is their largest motivation for this, to deny physicalism, of course.
Right, right, right. Madan, you want to add something? Before that, shall we take this one small comment? Right. It is strange to see Islamic apologists arguing against physicalism because the Islamic view of the soul is that it is a physical substance, as in it is something that can be pointed at in space. Right, right, right. I think we maybe discussed it somewhere, or maybe I was discussing it with somebody else, probably.
no, we discussed this in the
Um,
heavens stream that we did, the reality of the
Yeah,
heavens.
we did discuss it, right? Yeah.
And I think Kylie said as well that the view of the Islamic heaven is that it's a material heaven, and we are reunited with our loved ones in
yes.
this material
Yeah,
space.
yeah. I think
Right? Yeah.
yeah, Ugba
Okay.
also mentioned it probably in one of the streams. Probably I remember.
Yeah, I mean, there are two kinds of views. I have seen that more the groups who are more who follow the book more, literally. I think their worldview is that our existence, our entire body will be recreated by God, reassembled by God, and we'll be living in heaven. So their entire concept of heaven is very physical. But
Right,
there
physical.
are many, yeah, there are many groups within Islam who believe of a more spiritual worldview. But even their worldview is spiritual in the way that it is a slightly or maybe significantly different physical world, because it includes all those pleasures and all those material goods, seemingly material pleasures that are there in heaven, and all the kinds of punishments that are there in hell also seem quite physical. So even though those who believe that it isn't something physical as something similar to the physicality that we have over here in this world, even their worldview is doesn't mean that it isn't physical at all. Even that includes a bit of physicality. So I think it's a valid point to raise that even this concept of soul isn't something truly different from or truly non-physical. But I think the point how they might respond is about, once again, they do believe that soul can exist. So they would believe that it is essentially different and it can exist without a body, I think. So I think that is where the whole distinction would come, or that is where they would completely, or they would disagree with physicalism. Do you agree, Mahadan?
Sorry.
Okay, did you get me?
Yeah, I can hear
I'm
you.
saying,
Did you ask the question?
yeah, I'm saying that. Do you agree that they would disagree with physicalism because of this? That according to their belief, souls can exist without a body, without this, without this physical body that we have. I think, of course, again, we'll have to go into that semantics about what do they mean by soul. Then, if that is something physical in itself, then once again we're back again to the
Yeah.
original concept. So I think it isn't very clear. Okay, it's because it's the world of unknown, right? You don't know, so it's I think a relevant hadith here would be that nobody knows about the goods that are there in the heaven. that is there is a hadith.
Right, right,
So I
right.
think it's a world of unknown even in theology. Nobody knows what actually
Yeah.
heaven or hell
Yeah,
would actually look like.
yeah. I mean, in Islam, I mean, even jinns and angels are made up of something that can be consistent and compatible with physicalism broadly.
Physicalism, absolutely, yes.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
like,
Jinns are
like,
made of, yeah, right.
like light, nur, is like a
Fire,
maybe
fire.
light, yeah, or
Yes.
fire, smokeless fire, whatever you
Right.
want to call it.
Iblis is made of fire, right?
Right. But then at the same time, God is not a physical mind. So there is one disembodied, at least one disembodied physical mind, which is not consistent with physicalism, right? So theism, yeah, at least. And then what Kylie has said there, you got a potentiality for this interpretation for souls to exist in heaven, or even if it was the case that these were physical, it's a physical heaven with a physical person constituted of physical parts. It's at least possible, if Kylie said, if it's at least possible, then it might not be consistent with physicalism in the broad sense, but it might still be consistent with physicalism in the narrow sense. What I mean by that is the following, and this is foreshadowing what Reece is going to say soon. Just to remind viewers, I have casually watched this video 2 weeks ago. I don't remember all of it. We planned it about 2 weeks ago. David Papineau's version of physicalism is actually an a posteriori case, not an a priori case. He's not saying that physicalism must be true by definition. It's a necessary truth on all possible worlds. He's not saying that. His one is more of a factual claim of this specific universe. This specific universe is a physical one. That's it. And he's not saying anything about any other world. He's not saying anything about what was potential somewhere else. Now, this is the view that I take him to hold. This is his most recent view, and he's expressed this view on a number of videos where he's given a lecture. Now, if Reece has got a different version of it, then that's something else. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that's the view that I think that he holds. And on that view, where physicalism is learned through a posteriori reasoning, and furthermore, that it's not, although it's not a necessary truth, it's a highly probable based on background experience, based on success of science and physics, the closure principle, based on probabilities. It means that it's highly unlikely that this world contains non-physical things that are not reducible to ultimately physics, right? But then when you start talking about Islamic theology, are we talking about this world? And in that sense, maybe even David Papineau will agree that it's compatible with his view that that there can be a non-physical thing in a different world, right? In the sense that it's logically possible, because he's not saying that it's logically impossible that minds that ultimately do not reduce to brains or some other physical thing, or ultimately not physical minds, disembodied minds. He's not saying that's impossible to exist. He's not making that claim, right? And therefore, he's not speaking about that. He'll just say that it's highly improbable, right? Just like he might think Islamic theology is highly improbable based on the closure principle. And if you say that, but if you ask him, is it possible? Well, he'll probably admit that yes, that it is possible. But I was never denying that it was impossible. I was never saying that it's like analytical truth, like all bachelors must be unmarried, all triangles must be square, all triangles must have 3 sides on all possible worlds. It's not like that. He's not saying physical all worlds must contain physical things on all possible worlds. He's not saying that. So in that sense, Islamic theology is still logically possible, but he'll say it's highly improbable to be the case because we don't know whether these possible worlds exist. And if all the evidence, all the probabilities suggest that physical things explain everything, and then you have this kind of Islamic idea of the non-physical, he will argue based on all the things he said all so far, over determinism, the closure principle, Islamic theology is highly unlikely to be true. That's all we need to do. And that's the only thesis that he's making. He's never said it's impossible, basically. Yeah.
Agreed. So
And I mean,
it's
given that,
sure.
and if that is his case, then the entire case that I think Reece is going to build from now
Yes.
onwards, I think that would be relevant. The arguments that he's going to give would seem irrelevant, because I think all Reece is going to try to do, because I think I watched the second part of his video. He's only trying to show that no, this doesn't disprove the possibility of something non-physical. And then if that is his argument, then he's not actually dealing with the point that sorry, I forgot the name. Papa, what's the name? Papini. So Papini's argument, he's not actually dealing with that. David's argument, he's not actually dealing with his argument. Of course, we're going to actually listen to his Reese's argument, but I think his argument wouldn't be relevant to refute David's point then.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you here. I think what they are thinking is physicalism as a hard truth in all possible worlds, pretty much is what probably they are trying to refute. It seems so, but once we move on, Mahadin, sorry.
No, yeah, we should move on, and let's just hear what Reece says.
Right. Before that, we have a wonderful comment from one of our regulars, Cosmic Enquirer. Cosmic, thanks for the comment. Yes, we are in the process, mate. We are in the process. Did you read that, Madhan?
I can't see the screen, remember, I can just hear the audio.
Okay, I'll read it up. I feel emasculated when Madhin starts speaking about philosophy. Can we please kick him out of this stream?
Really? Why? I am the atheist version of Muhammad Hijab, basically. Boy, my God.
You're finished, boy.
You're finished, boy.
You're finished. Right. All right, let's move on.
Experience the grief. If we're dead, if there's no brain to support the soul, how does that go on? That's one problem. The next problem is, how do we explain miracles? How does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of issues that come here. Now, I'll tell you something that in the
can I just, sorry to interrupt, Reece. Can I just add something which always comes to my mind when these types of positions are elaborated on? It's the moral issue of not having free will.
Yes.
Punish someone who is killing innocent people.
So yeah, free will and moral responsibility.
Yeah. I think a lot of atheists are quite uncomfortable with determinism because of the moral implications of it. But it is something which is quite a popular position still, I would say, amongst the naturalists.
I think that it's, I mean, this is one of them. We don't want to start going into a tangent and start talking about free will and things like that.
Can we stop here?
If you want to talk about that instead.
That's another time we could do that.
So they started talking about free will, but just before free will, he mentioned, how would you explain miracles? I think that's quite a weak argument, because you'd have to prove what sort of miracles are you actually talking about. Most of the miracles that Muslims generally refer to are just documented, right, in their books. It's not something that that has actually been evidenced. There's no evidence for that generally. You could say that according to them, Quran is a miracle. Of course, that would be a different something that we have discussed in an earlier stream. But if they're talking about actual physical miracles, then I think, what is he actually talking about? What sort of miracles has he actually witnessed, or what sort of evidence does he have for those? Yes.
Yeah. Can I interrupt you? One of the most talked about miracles is the parting of the
moon splitting. Yeah,
the
moon
splitting
split.
of the moon. Not the parting of the sea. I was joining those two. So splitting of the moon is one of the most strong. But again, as you said, there are very few miracles. But then, where is the evidence? That's the question, right? And you still want to fit in those very weak miracle claims with this thing, basically, right? And so you want to, seemingly good hypothesis or a theory, that's physicalism, with just trying to fit in your weak miracle claims. And one more thing that there was, right, they they're saying they want to find something, because physicalism, so this is the uncomfortableness within them that's causing them to find a solution to physicalism. That they said, what do we do about morals, basically, right? And their contention probably at this point is, right, if we are just made up of physical matter, how do we say what is wrong, what is right, and all those things. And then the free will, what happens to the free will? Because then in some sense everything is determined, right? So I think this is I think Madan said it probably 5-10 minutes back, and the same thing, that it's their uncomfortableness is determining their belief, not the other way around. If something is true, just bite the bullet and say, okay, physicalism is true, and then deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, we're all adults, and we can't have a safety blanket. We can't defer to wishful thinking when we discover something. I mean, the world is full of misery and it's full of happiness as well, but it's full of unfortunate, distasteful, unlucky realizations, and that might be a separating factor between some people who are intellectually robustly glued to finding facts and logically thinking about things, and people who are just not like that, who are more intuitive, who are more empathic, well, no, I won't say empathic, but impacted by their empathy to the point where they are unable to distinguish between what they want to happen versus what is the case. But as adults, we need to put our hats on, and I openly say there's many things in the world that makes me feel dissatisfied. It doesn't mean it's true or false just based on that. If something is, like you just said, if something is true, then it's just true, independent of my feelings. And if we are adults and we're academics and we're thinking academically, I would submit to anybody who's listening to this, if Reece is listening to this, how can you motivate yourself to subvert philosophy for your own wishful thinking? That is got it the wrong way around, right? So philosophy is meant to be seeking the truth.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
The truth can't always be comfortable. If the truth is always somehow manages to be uncomfortable, then I would question whether you're actually searching for the truth and not just searching for a delusion. But if the truth might be dissatisfying. The truth, you can't handle the truth. That quote, you can't handle the truth. Yeah, you might not be able to handle the truth, but that's the whole point. That's the difference between adults and young and
Right.
children and emotional people.
And I mean, I don't want to bring any specific example of scripture, but even in Islamic theology, the way that free will has been dealt with in Islamic scriptures or sources, it's very difficult to conclude that even Islam, Islam believes in free will. There was a very large group called Mutazilites in the early time of Islam, in the early period of Islam, who did not believe in the concept of free will. They believe that we are all in here just for the experience. God has created us just as experiencing beings, and whatever He wants to do with us later in the afterlife, He's going to do with us. And plus the material that is there, whatever is mentioned in the Quran and Hadith about free will, I think there's a lot of problem in there as well. And I think you should, if you're looking at those at Quran and Hadith with an open mind, you should conclude that there is no free will in Islam. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I think if he's trying to pose that problem, I think there's a bigger problem within their own theology with regards to free will.
I think Mahaden, sorry, Mahaden, I'm saying, Cal, you have raised a very, very good point, right? The brother has raised a very good point. The point about this free will, a lot of honest apologists acknowledge that fact, that the free will that you have is just an illusion, even under the God hypothesis, and especially the Islamic God hypothesis, pretty much, right? And there are hadiths, I think we have probably mentioned in a couple of other streams earlier as well,
yes,
where you
very clear hadiths.
Each and everything of your fate has been already written down, basically, in the books. So from your birth to your going to either whether you're going to go to Jannah or Jahannam, everything is written. Your fate is completely written. So the kind of way that these apologists deal with this free will problem. I think we're not going to drag on too much into it and maybe cover this some other time. But the way they deal with it is that the free will that you have is just kind of an illusion there. Yeah, I mean that's how it is. But shall we move on then, or Matan, you want to add something to it?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say too much on that. I'll just say, in terms of what he said about miracles, though, it's very possible that he's going to probably say something like this anyway. I think in the future, it's very possible that miracles can just be physical things that happen in the universe. So, as David Hume argued, miracles are interruptions to the natural laws or regularities. A miracle is by is something that goes contrary to regularities that we usually see. So the sun comes up every day. If the sun somehow stopped coming up, that would be maybe a sign of a miracle. David Hume would possibly, or like people like myself would say, in order for it to be a miracle by God, it'll be God having to suspend the sun somehow, intervening into the natural law to do this, right? But if things are configured in a way where the sun doesn't come up and it's due to natural processes, then that could be a miracle in the sense that God caused the natural processes to happen in such a way that the regular stream of events, which is the sun comes up, technically, obviously, what I mean is the Earth is going around the sun, but just for colloquial language, the sun comes up every day. Sun comes up, and one day in 1718, 6th of December, 1718, the sun didn't come up. There's that one singular occurrence. And that's an interruption to a regular stream of events. That interruption doesn't have to be this supernatural or immaterial, disembodied experience by a mind or something, right? It can simply just be a natural. It could be a physical law. Part of this physical law was such that in 1970, completely deterministic events, something about the atoms, something about the cascades of physical events, not to come up. Simple as that. And that would be a miracle because God caused it. Or if not God, maybe like an alien. You can think it's an intelligent being that is also physical that caused what we, from our perspective, looks like a miracle, which is an interruption to the natural events. But it's all of it is still compatible with physicalism, right? What I would say though is the Islamic version of it might not be if he's what's his name? Reece is positing a God to do this, a disembodied mind, because probabilistically a disembodied mind can't exist based on physicalism, right? The thesis of based on the causal closure principle. Based on the causal closure principle, probabilistically, based on all of the experience that we have, the background data, it's highly unlikely there to be a disembodied mind who does this. So whilst it's possible that a physical mind can do it, and it will be completely compatible with physicalism, and whilst it's also possible that a disembodied mind can do it in a way that is not compatible with physicalism, because if God triggers these natural events, then although all the natural events are physical, the fact of God triggering it, which is a disembodied mind, it contradicts the thesis that there are no disembodied minds, right? In which case it's not compatible with physicalism. But it's still logically possible. Somebody may say it's logically possible that a disembodied mind can exist, metaphysically possible that a disembodied mind can exist, but it would mean physicalism has to be true or false, right? What I would say though is that although something you can think of things as being logically possible, how likely is it? Because Papanao's case is not that it's possible or impossible; it's highly unlikely. And remember that the causal closure principle suggests that the best inferences that we should make when we're making any theory about the origins of the universe, about what's happening within the universe, about unexplained phenomena within the universe, about the mind, is that the best first go-to that we should go to is its physical processes. That's it.
Right. So it's a probabilistic case, pretty much.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. One point I wanted to make. I earlier made a point regarding What was that point regarding? I think we'll move on and then I'll come back to it. I forgot what the point was. Kyle, you wanted to say something?
No, I think Madan has explained it. I don't have to add anything further.
All right, let's move on then.
You can ask me about all of those guys' biographies. I'll give you all the answers for those. But coming back to this, I would say, I mean, before we get into it, there's something quite funny, right? So when we're talking about this physicalism kind of stuff, in the lecture, I interrupted David Papanu, and I was like, so I started kind of debating with him there, and I was like, but what about this? What about this? He was getting a bit annoyed because he was kind of saying, can you just let me teach the lesson, please? And then I was like, okay, one more question. Let's just say we can trace every single physical action that has happened now.
Mhm.
What about at the beginning of time then? Who caused the Big Bang? And I was like, and what if the person who caused the Big Bang coded everything into the universe, and that's how miracles happen, and that's how certain things happen? And then he kind of just sat there and said, well, I suppose that's a possibility. And I was like, got ya. So even then, even if like hypothetically that side of things are true,
yeah,
it doesn't rule out God. It doesn't rule out kind of those aspects. Physicalism has a beginning and an ending in that sense.
Yeah. So just to understand your contention against him in the lecture in a bit more of a clearer way, are you saying that the laws of nature, alongside the exceptions, the miracles, they're all preloaded at the inception of the universe?
Yes, that's basically. So to put it into friendly Muslim terms, right? I'm saying other in this kind of formulation. I'm not saying this is like this is your aqidah. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the contention is if we said that other is essentially like the coding of the universe.
There we go.
and every phenomena, like let's just say, look, the parting of the sea. I'm sure the parting of the sea could potentially have physical, scientific explanations, but I mean, it doesn't matter if there were some tectonic plates and they were shifting, and then the sea momentarily parted enough for Bani Israel to cross. Yeah. It happened the moment Musa alayhi salam struck his staff, and that's what makes it a miracle. Not that the tectonic plates don't undermine that, right? So I'm not saying this is the case. That's not what I'm advocating. I'm just saying that even in a world where physicalism is true, none of this is undermined.
Yeah.
And when he
sorry, you said even in a world in which physicalism is true, none of this is undermined. Would you put it in those terms, or would you put it slightly differently? Because
Madan, you wanted to add something? I was getting some feedback. I thought probably you were saying something.
Keep playing.
Because we can't say because physicalism is saying it's making a claim about before the universe as well, right?
That's true, but physicalism can't really make that claim, right? So,
but that's their position, though. They believe it's maybe incoherent to talk about before the universe.
I mean, there had to have been a before the universe, right? So if we have like the pre-laws of physics,
yeah,
they had to have been there. They can't even, let's pretend to be atheists for no time at all. But let's say, look,
I just wanted to raise this point that Subboor has made some at least one good point over here. That's the claim. I think that if somebody is saying that before the universe, whatever was there, still constitutes as a physical universe, right? Or it's part of physicalism. Madan, would that be a right assessment?
Yeah. I mean,
right? I mean, if you are a naturalist, probably I would. I can speak for myself at least that. I'll say that whatever was there, energy or something that we didn't know, I would consider that to be a part of nature, or as a physicalist, I would say that constitute as a physical thing, pretty much, right?
Well, yeah, you have to, because it's not a mental thing. It's
not a mental thing. At least from David Papanu's definition, that's something physical, right? So if you go by his own definition, right, David Papanu's, I think Reece has got it wrong pretty much, right? I mean, when he's saying that there has to be something before, whatever it is, if it's a non-mental thing, it has to be physical pretty much.
I don't know what you mean, Reece has got it wrong. What's he got it wrong, sorry?
I think he's saying then what happens before the universe, right? That was the statement he made, right? A couple of minutes back, or probably 30 seconds
I think
back.
he got the definition wrong. Are you saying he's got the definition wrong? Or?
Oh, okay. Maybe I misheard that, right? Sorry. So, yeah. Another thing was that the earlier statement I made about free will, and then I said some of the apologists tag it as an illusion of free will. I don't think they tag it as an illusion of free will, but the way they say it, the way they pose that thing, that you can avoid the problem of free will. It seems like, and from our perspective, it seems like it's an illusion of free will, right? God knows everything that's going to happen in your life, but you don't know. You are still taking, your own decision with your own free thought, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I don't want to go into the free will question.
No. Just wanted to clarify, because I said that thing earlier. I just wanted to clarify that
Sure.
right in here.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's just leave that. If you want to say more on it, that's fine. But I don't really want to go into it.
Sorry. I had to do that, right?
Just make an already thick and complex stream more thick and complex. Talking about many issues. All I try to say on this part that they've talked about is that Subboor is right that physicalism is a universal thesis, and in the sense that if there has to be a before the Big Bang, I don't think Subboor said if, but if there has to be a bit before the Big Bang, if there has to be a before the Big Bang, then if that thing is not physical, then the thesis of physicalism has been falsified, right? The thesis has been falsified because there's going to be one thing which is not physical, let's say a mind, right? That ultimately does not reduce to another brain state or neuron or physical thing. It's just an irreducible mind. And if that's the case, then the thesis of physicalism is false. So the physicalist would be, to be a physicalist, he would have to show if there is a first cause before the Big Bang, let's say, or something, that all their causes before the Big Bang, those causes are physical. The only issue is there's, as Subboor has hinted, but the other guy, Reece, has tried to challenge saying, well, there has to be a before the universe. That's not clear-cut at all. There has to be a before. In fact, I know David Papineau's position on this. David Papineau's position is that with I think at least his understanding of mainstream physics, mainstream and so far it goes as being mainstream for cosmology, is that it makes no sense. It's incoherent to suggest a before. The causality principle doesn't apply before it. Now, I don't know what he thinks about other models of the universe, but I think Papineau would agree with me that it's a live issue. It's an open-ended issue right now. Which competing model of the universe is correct? Because we don't know whether or not the Big Bang had a beginning. That is the shift in position today, where in fact before it was they never actually said the Big Bang began. The Big Bang is like a balloon that, if you imagine the universe has been inflated, and if the Big Bang is imagining imagining the expansion of the universe, which is the deflation of the balloon back to its original state, and then the Big Bang goes to a point where you can't know what exactly happened before t equals 0, right? It seems as though time came into existence there, or something like that. But in reality, all it is that the Big Bang events or the universe expansion detracts or deflates back to a starting point, and we don't know what happened a second before that starting point. That's a crude way of describing it. I might not be describing it
right. I think, Madan, there are quite a few competing theories right now. I mean, so even the terms like before the Big Bang and all those things really are, in a sense, meaningless, because all the, at least classical physics breaks down at quantum level pretty much when you reach the Planck time and all those Planck era pretty much, right? But there are other competing theories as well, like CCC is one, which is conformal cyclic cosmology, which is coined by I think Roger Penrose, right? And then there is another one, Carol Chen model, where time is going, once you reach the state of singularity, on this other side, time points to the other direction basically, and you have another, so there's no absolute beginning. That's what I'm trying to say. And at least there are models. At least
And what Reece would have to do, not being a physicist or a cosmologist, is to explain why all of these models are flawed and his model is correct, which is that there has to be a beginning. That all of reality came at some point, and it didn't exist before that point. Even time didn't exist before that point, and it came into existence. And this is a cosmological question. It's a scientific question. And Reece or anybody else, an advocate for saying that the universe did have a beginning, which is not the consensus of experts on this subject, who are saying, Reece, you're wrong. Reece, you are wrong to say that the universe had a beginning. But if he insists, then he has to submit his paper. It's like denying evolution all over again. You know, creation is to deny evolution. At this moment, as cosmology, the most speculative and most uncertain science to date, yeah, experts, PhDs, some of the most smartest people in the world, they have IQs higher than, you know, all of us combined, maybe. They don't think with such certitude that it has to be a beginning. They say, wait, we don't actually know whether there was a beginning, right? Like some models may suggest that the universe came into existence. Other models suggest, no, we don't know. Other models suggest that the universe existed eternally. So the certitude he's expressing that, no, there has to be a beginning, is completely unwarranted in this scenario, right? So he's false about that. Unless he shows some sort of equations or experiments to demonstrate how he knows this, on par with cosmological theories, which I doubt he knows, because I don't know it, you don't know it, unless you're a cosmologist. My friend who's doing a PhD in cosmology, he's barely up to scratch yet. He's still training. So what we should have is humility, right? Defer to the experts. What are they saying? Are they actually saying there's an absolute beginning? Is this what you get when you open a cosmological textbook or read a paper or read a number of papers? No, you don't. Yeah, you instead get a mixed view where there's many models, and therefore we should be humble about it. Yeah. So, but what Reece says that if there, let's go with it for a minute. If there was an absolute beginning, sorry, if there had to be a beginning, yeah, and therefore something caused the universe, by definition, he's right. If the thing is like a mind and he programs the universe, a disembodied mind creates the universe, disembodied mind, and therefore physicalism is false. But again, the last thing that I said on this is that what is he talking about? What did Papineau argue? That it's a necessary truth, that it's logically impossible that a disembodied mind can exist, that a disembodied mind can cause the universe. He never argued that. He says it's probabilistically the case that for the universe, far as we know, far as we've seen, based on our probabilistic evidence, based on the causal closure principle, that all unknown, mysterious things that are unsolved right now, including the mind, which he thinks is solved, by the way, at least the hard problem of the consciousness is solved. These will be explained through physical causes. Physical effects are explained through physical causes. Anything else, he's not saying that in some imaginary world or some thought experiment or some logical possibility from an armchair, it's impossible to think of a situation where physicalism is false. Why would he even argue something like that, right? In fact, he would probably agree that the causal closure principle can logically in principle be false. We just have no reason to think that. In fact, all of the reason, the weight of reasons, say the opposite. And this is the final thing that I'll say just before I hand the mic to you guys, is that is what we should be doing. It's the easiest thing that a person can do is think about possibilities. It's possible that Elvis exists. It's possible that angels come out my arse. Yeah, it's possible that I can do wings.
Right? I was waiting for that example.
It's logically possible, right? Is there a contradiction in the concept? Is there like a logical contradiction?
Yeah, I think this too much credence is given to these logical
exactly. All logical possibility means, it doesn't even mean it's physically possible. Something is physically possible. It's like I can jump off a roof and I may not die. That's physically possible, right? If I jump off like 15-foot ceiling, most of the time I'll probably seriously injure myself and maybe die. There's a small chance that I will survive it. That's physically possible, but highly unlikely. When you say something is logically possible, it's not even that. It's not even physically possible. What we mean is that it's in its concept. It's like a language game. Linguistically, there's no weird oddity about the concept, right? Linguistically, there's no contradiction. So at least in principle, we can't rule it out. That's all it means. But you can think of many, like I said, logically possible things. It doesn't mean it's kind of likely. It doesn't mean it's somewhat likely. It doesn't mean even 50% likely, let alone 99% likely. And all that David Papineau is focused on is reality, which is that physically, it's highly likely that physical causes explain everything. And the thesis that physical causes doesn't explain everything is it has a very, very, very low likelihood and odds of being right. And this therefore rules out probabilistically stuff like disembodied minds. And that's what we care about. That's what we use most of the time. It's the reason why if I said to Reece that, look, why do you think your mother is not an alien? Well, sorry, I made that personal, but why do you think that's somebody that you know? Yeah, let's just go with it. I don't care anymore. Why do you think your mother is not an alien from outer space, right? Because the background knowledge suggests that your mother is like a human who came through human reproduction, right? And the likelihood that it's an alien, an extraterrestrial from outer space is very low. Is it logically possible that she's an alien? Yeah, it is logically possible. Is it any sensible person type of probability that she's an alien? No. A sensible person would say it's highly unlikely she's an alien. And that's what we care about. All right. I think we can move on.
Right, yeah, I think we should move on now. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to go at the beginning of the universe and Big Bang and propose a few more alternative theories. But you have made an excellent point there. So I'll just, move away from. So we have, I think, so what I realized that there were two basic, contentions that Reece and actually Reece had, right, in this paper of David Papanews. So shall we just to hurry up our summation of this, shall we directly move on to that part, or you still want to go through the whole of it? I think we should move on.
Yeah, we should move on. But do you remember what it says after this?
So I think I have a few timelines. So let me read the timelines and see what we, if something interests us, then we can just jump on to that timeline. Otherwise, we will directly jump onto the other objection that he had, right? The Swinburne response, the Libet experiments, and on consciousness and all that stuff. What do you think?
I think we should quickly jump to those. This is the last point on this part, and we should then quickly jump to them so that we can finish it hopefully in half an hour. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Even an atheist would accept there are kind of like pre-laws of physics, primordial laws of physics that were there before our current laws.
Yeah,
that has to be the case. Whether you kind of have like baby universes kind of spawning out of each other as if they're playing like Call of Duty or something, or like multiverses or whatever, there are some laws which are governing that, and there are laws that are governing all of that. They're in place.
Yeah.
Physicalism, or the account that we're having, and I think it's important to look at it, right? So you can be a physicalist on two counts, right? You can be a philosopher who has decided to be a physicalist and accepted that all that exists is a physical world. If you're doing that and you're making that claim, you're either doing it based upon a priori or a posteriori. So you're doing it based upon purely mental reasoning, or you're doing it based upon empiricism, essentially. You're looking at the evidence at hand. So you're looking at the scientific evidence, and you're saying that based upon science, I'm leading to this conclusion, or you're using rational arguments to get to that conclusion. The rational arguments don't get to have a say in a discussion about science in that sense. They don't get to kind of impose certain things on science because science has a limit in that sense. And if you're a physicalist because of science, you still don't get to do that because one, you're making an inductive assumption, and two, you're being circular because the whole point of science is to only, at least in physics, the physics is literally the study of the movement of matter. That is what physics is. It is to study the movement of physical entities.
Is that a true statement? Physics is just, I think maybe Reece needs to go to a university and study a little bit of physics. Probably he needs to study a little bit of physics. Maybe bring in our cosmologist friend and help Reece study a little bit of physics there.
Yeah, exactly.
Because physics is only concerned about the movement of matter. Yeah.
No, it's
Right. All right. I'm gonna move on.
Before you move on, what he said is that it's based on an inductive assumption. Insofar anything is an inductive reason, a good inductive reason, why is it an inductive assumption? Is it an inductive assumption that Reece is a human being? Is it an inductive assumption that humans came from other humans? Is it an inductive assumption that goats have 4 limbs or something like that? Is it an inductive assumption that oxygen is probably in your room based on past experience?
Yeah, Reece is Reece is treading the heavy waters or deeper waters right now, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
Those,
it's a good of yeah, it's a good enough of a inductive inference, I would say, rather than assumption. It's a justified inference. Insofar induction is the case and it's justified and it works. Unless you attack induction in and of itself, like using the problem of induction, induction holds water here, holds ground. Yeah, so it's a good enough.
I think Madan, if he started attacking induction right away, he'll have to give away all of his scriptures basically, because
Yes.
they have come through inductive,
Yeah.
process,
And the point of view.
at least the validity is proven through
Yeah.
inductive reasoning, basically.
Yes.
Right. So,
Yeah. So
he won't be able to hold that position as well at that point.
Yeah, Reece, if you're listening to this, you learn about the Quran through your observation. And it's through inductive reasoning that you can make generalizations about the Quran. It's through the historical method that you learn about the hadiths. And the historical method is a science, right? The hadith science is a science.
Yeah, the tawatur, the method of tawatur and all those things. Yeah, no, that is coming through inductive,
And
body
just
of,
like
knowledge, right?
If the induction is a problem, for example, if you wake up tomorrow and the sun may not come up, well, if you wake up tomorrow, it could be that the Quran was, we might learn something new about the Quran that would falsify it, right? So they're both equivalent in that regard. So if past events or past experience, the future may not resemble the past. If that's basically the problem of induction. The future may not resemble the past. Then your future may not resemble your past either, including everything in it, including the Quran, facts about the Prophet Muhammad, history, your mom and dad, facts about let's say the miraculous linguistic argument of the Quran. Tomorrow something might alter those findings. So the problem of induction is if you deny induction or you think it's weak, you can't support any of those conclusions that you make through induction, including the beginning of the universe, which comes through what? Science, the cosmological sciences. So you can't attack and call induction an assumption and simultaneously still use induction for building your case for theology, which is rests upon induction. It doesn't happen in your mind through a priori reasoning, right? You have to make some observations about the natural world.
All right. So Madan, what I'm gonna do is, before we move on, I think what I'm gonna do is, I'm just gonna give you the timelines and kind of the topics that are covered, and we jump to something that we feel like, because otherwise, if we run through it, then it's gonna take a lot of time, right?
Yeah. Give me 1 minute. Give me 60 seconds before you do that.
Sure. Not a problem.
Last thing to say, but what Reece was saying is that you can make a case through a priori or a posteriori. And I think if it's a posteriori, then physics presupposes physics. So it's like circular. No. Physics, first of all, the a posteriori. The a posteriori person doesn't presuppose physics. He just uses empiricism, and empiricism is not the same as physics. This is a point that he mentioned right at the beginning. Empiricism is not necessarily physics.
Yeah, I think he's just forgot what he said, right? He clarified this point at the very beginning himself, that physicalism does not mean that empiricism, right?
Being palatable to him, maybe he meant that. Well, I don't know what he meant. Maybe he thinks the Islamic version of heaven and meeting God is a physical one, right? But he can't think that. We know by definition that God is disembodied. So I'm not sure exactly what. Right, but I don't know exactly what he meant then. He's confused. But it doesn't presuppose, empiricism, first of all, doesn't presuppose that we would have had a physical world. Look at Bishop Berkeley, for example. He's an idealist. He's an empiricist and an idealist, right? He thinks the main way of knowing about the world is through our sensory perceptions. But he doesn't think a physical body exists. He thinks a physical body is a representation in a mind. Ultimately, everything is immaterial. If the physical body exists in the same way a physical body exists in a dream when you're sleeping, right? It's a figment of your imagination. And in the same sense, then but yet he thinks in order to learn things about this dreamlike world, you have to use empiricism. You learn through experience. And so there's nothing in empiricism that commits you to physics One. Two, nothing in physics that commits you to matter. Two. So he makes fundamental flaws there. So it could have been the case. It's not as though Peppino is like circular here by using a circular method that will forego him. Sorry, will prevent him from learning anything more. It could have been the case that Bishop Berkeley was correct. So Peppino has arguments to dismiss idealism and go with the idea that the world is physical. And it could have been the case that our minds are not attached to our brains. It could have been the case. It could have been a possible reality that physical causes does not explain the universe. Every time we try to explain the universe, like lightning, like a white rain comes out of clouds and so on, we could have discovered no mechanistic, reducible explanation to atoms and physical components and so on. It could have been that we could have discovered there was a mind, and then when we tried to reduce the mind to its physics, we would not have found any physics. Doesn't matter how hard we tried, right? If the track record was like that, we didn't have any physical explanations in that sense, right? Where we go out to look at the world and it doesn't boil down to something like chemical, biochemical, and then some molecules, and then quantum world. We never found these things. Instead, the world is constituted of minds that cannot be reduced, right? We just like Casper the Friendly Ghost. Casper comes along and he does things like Thor comes along and he causes lightning. And when we try to study the lightning, we can't find some sort of mechanism to explain it. It's just Thor thinks lightning, throws it, and it happens. So it's like an immaterial mind type of thing. If that was the case, then the world would have at least been consistent with disembodied minds, right? Etc. In the sense that it's not disembodied minds that does not reduce back to physics. That could have been the case, and again, the Bishop Berkeley idealism could have been the case. So it's not by definition committed to the conclusion that only physical things it would exist. But let's say even if it was. One more point. Let's say it was. I know I've gone far exceeded 60 seconds. Let's say it was. That might just be the reality of sensing the world with our senses. What else do you have? Right? It's like saying relying on empiricism. Yeah, go on.
Madan, sorry. Finish your thought, then I have a question, right?
Yeah, it's like saying sensing the world with your senses would mean that things without your senses will not you'll if things existed without your senses. Well, the physicalist is not hard committed to the position that they can tell things exist without your senses. All the physicalist is saying that insofar as to what we know, our sensory perceptions, our data and observations suggest that there is a physical world. Now, it's true that sense data or senses such as taste, smell, touch, these things are limited by their faculties. If there is a non-sense data world out there, things that we can't acquire through our senses, we'll never know it. But the physicalist is not saying that they're not necessarily like, if you're like the logical positivists, they would agree, but we can never tell, we can be none the less wiser about that. It's a non-truth apt statement. It's something that we can't falsify or verify because we can't have any sort of experience ever with the world without experiencing it. Even if we die and go to heaven, that could be we can't know anything beyond our experiences. It'll always be sense data. So if you're a physicalist in the same sense of as a logical positivist who denies an ontology, dismisses an ontology, but only says we can only have an epistemology. That is, we can only know things, but we can't know the absolute ontological nature of the world, simply because we are bound by our senses, like Immanuel Kant thought as well. We can never know what the world looks like without our senses. It's not possible to have that. If we agree with that, then of course somebody can oppose Reece and say, yeah, I agree that if we're going to do sensory experiences and so on, to that, if empiricism is the only way you can know about the world, which the positivists and some physicalists, some, not all, but some physicalists would contend that is the case. Because give me another option. Give me another option other than building knowledge about the world, other than sensory perceptions. Yeah, all of knowledge about everything, like David Hume argued, is learned through experience. Even the analytical truths are ultimately initially first known through experience, and then we rationalize. But ultimately, how we know that a square is not a triangle or a bachelor has been unmarried is through experience. If you can think of another way, then that'll be it. But then we don't have that way. So the best one is empiricism. And if it is the case that empiricism means that all we can rely on is sense data, then that is ultimately the reality. It's not circular. It just means that it's the least problem-ridden system out of all contenders. All non-empirical methods compared to that one is worse, and that is the best one. And if there's a circularity to it, well, most logical positivists like A.J. Ayer and even Bertrand Russell, even modern day ones, would concede and say, yes, I know, but we can't do anything about that. We're all stuck in that. We're all stuck with our senses. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was the question that I had in mind. Is can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah. And is if our senses is all that we have, and can using those senses we can definitely discover physical phenomena or physical things basically. But can we, if say somebody comes in and says, what would it take for physicalism to be false? What kind of empirical data would you get through your senses that would deny it pretty much? Is that a possibility, do you think? Because whatever we discover through our senses is going to be physical pretty much, right? So if there is a reality which is probably
well, remember what we mean by physical is non-mental stuff.
Yeah, non-mental stuff, right?
Can we find mental stuff?
Can we find mental stuff through our senses? Is that the question? That's the question.
Can we find mental? Yeah. Can we? No. Let's just be clear. Can we find non-mental stuff that is not reducible to physics? And yes, I submit it is logically possible that we can find mental. For example, it'll be an abductive case, a probabilistic case. Let's suppose that our minds were not attached to our bodies. Let's suppose there was no brain-mind connection. Let's suppose every time a part of the brain was damaged, nothing happened to mentality. Let's suppose brains did not develop through a billion-year evolution, through progressive stages, through gradual stages across species. Let's suppose as the skull increased, cognitive capacity did not increase. Let's suppose as you aged from 1 to 20, your brain capacity didn't enhance. And let's suppose we did a split brain surgery, and your personality was completely intact, even though your brain was
the question. I mean, there are numerous examples.
Let me finish this. Yeah. Let's suppose all that was the other way around. The data suggested there was no connection between the mind and the body. That would be a probabilistic case for dualism. You don't need to experience it in a hard sense. It's because, look, science doesn't operate with just by direct experiences all the time. We make indirect inferences all the time. Like we knew that electrons exist without observing an electron.
The question I have is, can we distinguish between the two possibilities? Now, the dualism is established with the examples that you have given us, right? If that's
it's a probabilistic case.
Probabilistic case, right? Yeah. Can we find out whether that's a mental or non-mental? Basically, is the question I'm asking, right? Is it possible to establish that? No.
Well, remember, the thesis against physicalism is irreducible non-mental stuff, right?
Okay, right.
All we have to do,
so at that point, physicalism is destroyed, and you're saying basically, right?
Yeah. We're not denying. First of all, even on physicalism, we don't have to deny the possibility of mental stuff, unless you're an advocate of the problem of other minds. If you believe other minds exist, if animals have some conscious states, you've already accepted mental stuff. You see that? In order to disprove of a physicalism, you have to show that those mental states does not reduce to physics. And I've outlined a possibility here, a circumstantial sort of case or a cumulative case of. Kylie's probably listening to this and probably agreeing with me, because Kylie made this point to me in private once upon a time in the last conversation, that split brain patients, the fact that you divide the brain up into two halves, and it shows that our consciousness is divided, suggests that brain and the consciousness suggests, doesn't conclude, but that the brain and the consciousness are one.
Both physical.
When you have a series of many different evidences like that, there's evidence of chronological age development of capacities as the brain gets bigger, and your mental aptitudes, mental capacities, your mental states, and then you look at it cross species as well. As the brain matter increases, our consciousness increases between species as well. And then you've got evidence of damaging parts of the brain. When you damage the auditory functions of the brain, you stop listening to things. You can't hear things. Again, all of this suggests a non-dualistic account. It doesn't completely logically state that dualism is not possible. It could still be that dualism is true, but it's a probabilistic case, and it increases the probability of physicalism. But had it been different, the world could have been different, couldn't it? It could have been the case that we didn't have this interspecies consciousness development through skull size increase. It could have been this case that right from the moment we were born, our consciousness would have stayed the same, and has no link to the physical matter of our brains growing through age, successive stages of our age development. And finally, it could have been the case when you split a brain into half, the consciousness remains. And it could have been the case when you destroy the brain, our consciousness remains. Like ghosts, it could have been the case that after one man has died, like Hitler had died, we could have still heard Hitler's voice. We could have still seen Hitler move objects like a paranormal entity, right? It could have still been the case that Hitler's essence remained. I would say all of that wouldn't have concluded that dualism is true, but it would have highly increased the odds to the point where I would have been a dualist or some sort of dualist. I would have thought, okay, this is not reducible to
physical. Yeah.
It doesn't. There could still be a physical essence that we can't see there, but it increases the likelihood of it. And I would say that if all of these things were true, I would steer towards the direction of dualism. So it's possible.
Right. I see. Okay. All right. Excellent. So Mahathir, what I think we are already hitting 1 hour 52 mark. So maybe shall we stop it here? Shall we stop it here and then cover the next one? I think as usual we overstepped from what we thought we would, but then the topic is interesting among ourselves. We took a little bit too much time, and rightly so, because there was so much to dig into. So what I'm thinking is maybe stop the stream here and then do the second part, because we have I think Reece had two contentions over here. One is the premise number 2 here, and the other one is to come later on, which we were going to discuss. But if we go into that right now, I think it's going to be another hour or so. We're going to
need a part 2 for this.
Yeah, I think we should do a part 2 so that we deal with this nicely and not hurry over in the same stream, right? Kelly, you okay?
Yep, I'm okay.
I think all the heavy lifting was done by Mahathir on this one, and rightly so. And we were just the pawns, pretty much defenseless pawns at the front of the.
Yeah, it was a class for me. It was an educational class for me. I learned a lot from Mahathir today. So I was listening intently. That's why. So
But did you like, Kylie, what I said at the end? I think that makes sense. Because
no, absolutely, and I think we already discussed that point, right? That is where the whole I would say, for me, and I think for many of the people who have this particular belief, who believe that the mind does not exist independent of of this body, is that the things that we experience and the things that we see in this world seems to indicate, I think for me at least very strongly, that there is our mind is dependent, or at least something that is extremely connected with our brain. The split brain condition that you mentioned, that we discussed earlier as well, it gives a very strong reason for us to believe that if mind was something that was not physical, not something within our brain, if we could use that uh, sort of way of describing it, then you would not experience the division of personality that we see in such patients. We wouldn't see that. We wouldn't see the gradualism, as you mentioned, in our intellect that we see when we are growing. From when a child grows to an adult, he experiences this increase in intellect and consciousness, and then it reduces over time when he's aging, when he gets old. There is an entire spectrum of species where we see different levels of consciousness and intelligence that arising based on their brain sizes as a proportion of their whole body. So all of these seem to indicate that ultimately, our mind has something to do, or is extremely connected with our brain. And I think that is a primary argument. At least for me, it's a primary argument that I would make. It's a probabilistic argument, I agree, and you have mentioned that as well. It is not an absolute argument, but that is how we argue. That is how we make judgments. And I think that is my judgment based on the things that I know, and that based on my observations and the scientific observations that there are.
Absolutely,
All
yeah.
right. Anybody who's listening? Sorry, Madin. Anybody who's listening to this. I think three of us had talked about this probably, maybe in a personal conversation, or maybe in one of the stream. But anybody who wants to read that study, it's by V.S. Ramachandran. I think it's split by brain personality. Some experiments have been done by V.S. Ramachandran, right? Correct me, Kelly, if I'm wrong, right?
Yes, I think they can easily even they don't even have to look up specifically Dr. Professor Ramachandran, but they should look him up. He's a very interesting a person. His lectures are a neuroscientist. He has very interesting lectures. People should listen to him. But if they're just interested in the split brain experiment, or the split brain syndrome, that's how it's usually referred to as. So they should look it up and see the cases, and see how their personality, not their personality, but their experiences and consciousnesses divide. How that happens. That is something that people should actually look into and see. I think it's a very strong indicator of maybe physicalism.
Right. Yeah. Madan, you wanted to add something to it?
No. I think I've said pretty much everything. If anybody wants to come on and wants to discuss anything, then I suggest now is the time. But I think, ultimately, I've said everything that I wanted to say. The last point that I made, that we all agreed on, is that physicalism is indeed a falsifiable thesis. That's what we're trying to say. It can be falsified, physicalism. It's not what Reece is saying, that it's unfalsifiable, right? Like physicalism is just presupposed by the fact that we have senses. Even if that was the case, that would just be a reality of our sensory perceptions, right? Just in the same sense that if I say, well, not in the same sense, but if it turned out to be the case that sensory perceptions lead to physicalism, then so be it, right? The fact that we can never find a non-physical thing, it doesn't give any added credence to the alternative theory. It simply makes it even weaker, I would suggest, in the sense that that is just the reality. I mean, if for every time we learn something about the world, it has to be a physical thing by definition.
then the idea is that it will be impossible to make any claims about the contrary. But as soon as in other words, it'll be, even if you die and go to heaven, that will be a physical experience. That is what you're having to say, that empiricism presupposes physicalism. If that's the case, then even theists can't experience God, can't experience that immaterial heaven, and etc. It's impossible. They're all stuck with physicalism. It only what this actually does, in fact, is make the a priori case for physicalism. That it has to be the case in all possible worlds, right? If anything, or close to that. What I would submit that Reece is not saying that. Reece is trying to say that that it's logically empiricism. Although he didn't mention empiricism, he says the quest for physics. But what else? How do we learn about physics? Well, through empiricism. Empiricism will always lead to physics, and that's just circular. And I've been trying to explain, at least, that no, it's actually falsifiable. It's falsifiable in the sense that there's nothing in the causal closure principle that required it to be such, to be so strong. The history of events could have been different. It could have been the case. It could have been the case that the four fundamental laws that we learned in physics wouldn't have been the case. Maybe there would have been a missing law. Maybe there would have been incomplete information, right? The causal closure principle has been made stronger by the fact that we have identified all the types of causes, all the types of forces, and there's unlikely to be anything else. That, if that was just weaker, that would weaken the causal closure principle. And then everything that I said about brains, how mental phenomena continues despite the brain being destroyed, that is falsified. Again, that's falsifiable. That could have been the case. That we could have had an experience of that in that way, but the science didn't turn out to be the case like that. So all of these are falsifiable, and therefore physicalism is indeed a falsifiable thesis. Yeah,
Right. I think we agree on that point. A brain that's smashed to smithereens. If a limb could move, then probably that's a strong case for dualism. Probably.
Yes.
All right. I think nobody's out there to join us, so we shall close the stream. Any closing comments, or otherwise I'm just gonna shut down the stream. Kelly?
No, I think I've already sort of summarized my case for physicalism at the end.
All right. Then I think Madin, you want to add something?
No. I think next time we'll finish everything. And if Reece is watching this, feel free to comment on part 1, but part 2 is still coming.
Yeah, there'll definitely be a part 2, because we have, I think, broadly, we realize there are 2 or 3 main points made by Reece. I mean, for an argument against physicalism. So we're going to have a part 2, which is probably again going to be at least probably it's going to take us an hour at least. So that's why we decided that we're going to just finish this over here and not make this stream any longer. If you're watching it later on anytime, please do like, subscribe, and share as much as you can. If you're if you like philosophy just like we do, at least I can say for myself, I'm learning it, philosophy, and I like it. So I hope you like it, and you like to listen to these arguments, these kind of deep things, if I may say so. So do share it with anybody who likes to listen to these kind of streams. And we kind of emphasize one one perspective from we take it from the Islamic perspective, and kind of not dismantle, but dissect, as I would use the word, kind of those arguments from Islamic perspective. So that's kind of more oriented towards subcontinental crowd, and as well as more American and UK based crowd as well, because we have 2 different streams in English as well as in Urdu and Hindi. So do comment, share your thoughts, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye.